Good afternoon, everyone. Today, my video will be about frustration. Like, why do we get frustrated? How do we avoid that? And how can we use our our understanding of frustration to benefit us in the practice room? But first, we're gonna say hello to a special guest. It's my doggy. She's here. She's chilling. Say hello. She's not gonna say hello, but anyway. So, frustration in the practice room. So, for starters, frustration is just you being upset, annoyed, or something, a negative feeling because you're unable to change or unable to do something, right? Well, at least that's what to my understanding, that's what I define as frustration. Oftentimes, as musicians, we get frustrated because we don't perform as well as we want to. We don't perform as well as we do in a practice room, and our lessons just aren't as successful as we want them to be. And, for a while, I was just like, why is that? Like I practice, I practice all the time, but my lessons never felt like as good as they could be. I'd be like, oh, well, I already worked on that. Like, why are we sort of retouching this thing that I already know that I'm already working on? And obviously, sometimes you just need to work on it longer, but it made me frustrated because I was just like, I hate this. I hate this. Like, I don't like going to lessons and then just having to redo the same lesson I did last week. It was a waste of time and money, at least in my opinion, at that time. So, you know, uh, I got some really great advice from my high school band director. He's like, Nelson, if you're ever getting frustrated while you're in the practice room or just like in life in general, it's because you're missing a step. And I was just like, I don't really understand. I did at the time, 2, 3 years ago, I didn't really understand what that meant. But now, reflecting back on it now, second year in uni, fourth semester, I finally understood what he meant. So, for example, my, I was doing some work on my tuning just because my tuning isn't 100%. Like my tuning, I'm always working on that to be better. I feel like that's probably my weakest aspect right now. And my professor, he told me, he's like, oh, you should work on tuning with a drone. Like you should play your scales with a drone and just all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And I did that for a while. Like I probably did that for like a month and a half because he told me this before the first semester of this year ended. So I worked on it all throughout the break and obviously with all my other routines or like my fundamentals involved. And then, I get back to school. I'm still practicing with a drone, but obviously I'm not going into my lesson with a drone. And I'm like, he's still mentioning tuning. I'm like, but my tuning, whenever I use a drone, is fine. So I'm just like, okay, maybe it's just, new and different or a refresher of this environment that I've already been in. So I'm just not used to it. So I give it a couple weeks and I still don't really notice much change. Like when I play with a drone, I'm like perfectly fine. Then I get into my lesson, I'm like, So I sit in on a lesson with one of my friends and I asked my professor near the end of the lesson, I said, I'm still having trouble with tuning. Like I like with a drone, I got it, but as soon as I take it away, like it's just not there. He's just like, oh, well, have you like tried singing the scales? Like, have you tried playing the tonic and just sing up the scales and then down the scale and then sing the arpeggio? I said, no. He's like, okay, well, let's do that. He played a B flat. I sang a B flat scale. And then he's like, all right, do this minor arpeggio. And I was like, what? A minor B flat arpeggio? Like, obviously, mentally, like, I know what the notes are and I know everything, but I just couldn't sing it. I couldn't vocalize it. And he's like, oh, that's your issue. And I was like, huh, that's interesting because it helped me understand more that, yeah, I'm going from here to here, but I'm missing everything in between. Like I'm trying to go from, oh, tuning with a drone, which is the most specific tuning you can get, to, oh, tuning without anything. And I'm like, I'm missing the step in between where I'm just like, oh, well, can you sing the note? Can you hear the note before you play? So that's a lot of what I've been working on. And now that he's told me that, I've started to get less frustrated in the practice room. I haven't really gotten frustrated in the practice room in a long time because of that. Like I realized if I'm not getting from point A to point B, then I'm missing a step in between, and I just need to reevaluate how I'm approaching things, right? So, but then, you run into the issue, like this issue where, oh, well, I don't know what to do. That's why you have lessons. You get different approaches to how to do things and just different ways to practice. So yeah, I think that's like level one frustration, in terms of like that's probably the most solvable thing in that regard. Like, oh, if you're getting frustrated because you can't do something in your lesson, then you should reevaluate how you're practicing it to see if you're missing a step. So then when you get in the lesson, when you have to perform it all in front of your professor or lesson teacher, you might be missing a step in your practice that isn't, it's not there when you actually perform. So that's the first one. The second one is just being frustrated when you're having a bad day, like bad playing day or bad just mental day overall. So when you're having a bad mental day, there's two, I think, main parts I wanted to vocalize or just speak about. The first one is you should never try to do anything when you're having a bad day. Like when you're having an awful day, you should just try to relax. Just do things that you enjoy and just try to not let those emotions define. Don't let them bleed into the things you love doing. Because obviously if you're practicing and you're watching this video, it's because you love doing that. So if you're having a bad day, you should not allow those negative emotions to creep into that. Because if you do, eventually, if you do that enough times, you're going to build this habit where, oh, well, I associate the trombone or whatever with bad emotions because you're so used to like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Let me just go practice, for some reason because you feel like it'll make you feel better. Second one is, if trombone is your outlet, find different outlets. Like, I love the trombone. It's what I'm doing. Like, I'm a music ed student and I love the trombone. But I can't solely rely on that to be my source of happiness or my source of enjoyment, because I know that at the very end of the day, yes, I love doing it, but it's not just a hobby anymore. It's not just something I can put off for 300 days or whatever just because like I don't want to do it right now. No, like this is something I have to commit to because it is something I want to do for the rest of my life. So it is essentially a job to me, right? Trombone is a job, and it's a job I love doing. It's basically a hobby that has turned into a job. So yeah, find different like sources to allow yourself to be happier, because if you're just solely relying on that one thing, what happens when you're having a bad playing day and now the one thing that makes you like feel better isn't there because of other circumstances? Like there's so many other things you could do, like chess, you could read books. There's just other things to do that can still benefit you as a musician and as a player, but not destroy your mental health in the long run. That's the second frustration, like getting frustrated outside of trombone and letting that affect what you do when you practice or how you practice. The third one is, having a bad physical day. That one's easy. Listen to your body. Like if your body's like, hey, I'm hungry, dehydrated, mentally I'm not there. Listen to your body. Like your body will tell you if it's not feeling right. Like last weekend I was practicing and I was like, I had gotten to my 4th or 5th hour sometime around the evening, and I was just like, all right, let me just go for another hour. And I was just like, I can't do it. Like I was just sitting down and I was like, I couldn't bring myself to get up. And it's like mentally I knew I want to practice, but physically my body was like, no, you shouldn't practice. Like, and I was just like, what? Why? So I was like, okay, let me just take some more time to rest. I go and hit the gym, and I'm like, okay, I come back. I rest for like 30 more minutes, a little longer than I usually do before I practice. And my body was just like, no. So I'm like, okay. My body told me not to. And I was just like, okay. And I just went home. There's a lot of times when I was younger, my body would be like, no, don't do that. And I do it anyways, practicing. And I just have really bad practice sessions, or I build some bad habits. So just listen to your body. Take care of your essentials: food, water, and emotions. Those are like three very important things when it comes to trombone playing or just music playing in general. If your body isn't nurtured in the right way, it's going to be very hard for you to find success in trying to improve on something mentally. The fourth one, and personally the one that I think is the biggest and sort of the longest one to get through and sort of solve, is your mental health. Being too negative in the practice room, comparing yourself to others, comparing yourself too harshly, or comparing yourself too lightly, and that leading to you feeling like you're not improving. This is such a long process to sort of solve because, as musicians, I feel like a lot of us have like this lesson teacher who like pushes us really hard, and he's like, oh, you could do this if you do this. And, like we've shown building these bad habits mentally, like, oh, Nelson, you only suck because you don't practice enough, or you only suck because of this. And you're sort of only allowing your spectrum of thinking to be in the bad side, like the left. Let's say this is the bad side of your playing, and then this is the good side. So if you're in the broad spectrum of things, you're going to be able to think of more things, right? So when you're only allowing yourself to think of the negative, your brain is constantly picking itself apart and thinking, man, maybe I can't really do this. Maybe I can't really do this. So then that leads to burnout. That leads to not wanting to practice. That leads to less motivation. That leads to less successful motivation. Like I feel like a lot of us are like, oh, well, being negative drives me. Like people telling me I suck drives me. I'm like, it's not that. It's that you lacking success in your practice leading to people telling you that you suck is what motivates you. But if you felt like you were being productive, like when I have a really productive day, and if someone was like to go up to me and be like, damn, Nelson, like you haven't made any progress, like you suck, that'd make me feel like crap. I wouldn't want to practice anymore if someone like had told me that I was doing really bad after I felt like I had improved over a period of time. So you have to keep your mind broad. You have to be able to think, like when you're picking apart your playing and you're trying to improve, you have to think, oh, well, this is like the bad part of my playing that I need to work on, and this is how I work on it. And that can be done by listening, taking lessons. There's so many ways to do that. But you have to also be able to think about this side of the spectrum. You have to think, oh, well, 2 months ago, I couldn't do that. So, for example, I was practicing my high range. I'm just trying to build high range and just build tone and build everything in my high range because it's not there like it used to be, because a lot of embouchure switches and just a lot of issues that have finally come back to me. And I was doing C above the staff, or like high C above the staff, and I was just like, I can't really get much higher than this. But then I played it in context of some etude that I was working on, and I was like, oh, that's actually pretty good. Like before, I wasn't able to play that high C without doing like some weird tension or some weird shift here. So that was me looking at the good side. I was like, yeah, I don't really have as much range as I want, but I'm actually able to play this a lot smoother, a lot better than I had 2 months ago. You should be able to look at the entire spectrum of trombone playing, or just your life in general, in my opinion, and look at the bad and think, how can I make this bad move here, then here, then here? And you have to be able to look at the good and think, okay, this is good. How can I move it here, here, here? You're always trying to move your bad here. And you have to recognize something can be bad, but it's not be viewed here. Like it doesn't have to be viewed in like a negative, like down at the bottom. You don't have to beat yourself up just because you can't do something. You work on it and you tell yourself that you will get better at it, and you do. Like when you're just constantly being negative, it's so much harder for your brain and your ear to even comprehend improvement. You're like, oh man, like that was only slightly better. That's trash. So, you're constantly making these small improvements as a musician because it's a long process. And then all of a sudden you build this habit where if you make small improvement, you don't notice it and you're just beating yourself up. And that, now you're getting burnt out because you feel like you're not improving. Now you're losing motivation. And as soon as I started viewing myself less negatively, I'm like, oh, I can't do this right now. I can't do this yet. I will be able to do this if I work on it. I haven't really felt too. I haven't felt mentally drained, and obviously, that's harder. That's easier said than done. But just catching yourself every day, like, oh, I shouldn't be saying that. A good way is like, if my peer was saying this about their own playing, or if my peer was saying this about themselves, would I approve of that? Would I want them to say that? And if the answer is no, then you should reevaluate and just reword what you're saying to yourself, because obviously you can't just be positive, positive, positive all the time, because you have to have the things you're bad at and negatively that you're viewing at it in a good aspect. You're like, oh, I can't do this, but eventually I will be able to. You're just rephrasing that, and it's overall benefiting your outlook on your ability as a musician. So, yeah, those are like the biggest things relating to frustration in the practice room that I've experienced and I've gotten through. And the fourth one's the biggest. Like, I still get frustrated with that, just being negative to myself. And it's something you have to be aware of. And if you're not aware of it, you're never going to improve on it. It's just like playing the trombone. If you're not aware of an issue, you're not going to think it's an issue. So the first step is realization. You have to realize, oh, what I'm doing, this isn't good. The second step is thinking, oh, what can I do to make this better? Can I approach it a different way? Can I practice this a different way? Like, this is life and trombone. The third one is action. So this is what I think I can do, and then this is the action part. So then sometimes you have to go back and forth between these two, because you're like, oh, well, maybe this wasn't the right decision, so now I have to go back. Or, this didn't lead to the right decision from this, so now I have to go back, re-edit this, and then approach this again. This usually stays the same. Once you realize you have an issue, you tend to work on that, hopefully. And so then the fourth one is success/improvement in it. You start to realize, oh, this is actually getting better. This is actually becoming a lot easier, more fun. And the fifth one is acceptance. You accepted the fact that you were having a hard time, you weren't looking at something, or you were treating yourself poorly. You questioned why and how to get better at it. You did it. You've made improvement, and now it's become your life. Now your everyday life is much more positive, and you're looking at it in this side of the spectrum instead of just being here. And now your thoughts consist of everything instead of just this small spectrum, which is so negative that your brain doesn't even want to care to notice the small things in your playing. It just wants to see the big things that can take you from here to here, but you're missing the here to there. Hope this helps.